What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Dead Space 4. Not really the topic I thought we would be doing, but I'm glad to hear it, even if it sounds kind of like, cautious optimism. We have the creator of Dead Space, of course, Glenn Schofield, who I look at as a legend. He definitely, after Dead Space 1, he doesn't do Dead Space 2, doesn't do Dead Space 3, obviously does the Callisto Protocol, and I wanted that to be so freaking good, and it ultimately was not. I would like to go back and replay it, see if my thoughts have changed in any way, or maybe it's aged better than when it originally came out, but the guy still, I believe, is a legend, starting Dead Space, doing COD, doing a couple really good Call of Duty games, so he's pretty talkative, and I actually very much like the just honesty, in his voice and what he says. And, in this interview with IGN, he talks about a Dead Space 4, but he also talks even just a little while ago that he went to EA and they shut him down, I believe, 2 different times. And he's done this before. I think post Callisto Protocol, he sounded kind of energized to get Dead Space going. I think he's actually been turned down multiple, like even beyond those 2. I think he was turned down even more times, even before that, from EA to do a Dead Space 4. So let's look at the article coming from IGN. Biggest part here is he says, I went to EA recently and they're like, no, we're not interested anymore. I said I can get back the leadership team. I need the models from EA Motive, who did the remake, and I can save you $30 to $40 million on the idea that I have. And they're like, no. Then they go over his background and he says, I have quite a few ideas that I'm ready to go with, and one of them is Dead Space 4. The fact that EA just got bought, I think there's an opportunity. I'm already making calls. And then he said, in terms of the whole buyout thing, he said, we'll see. I don't know where EA's head is right now. I don't think that they made money on the remake. Dead Space needs to be adapted to different mediums, movies, TV series. It would be great. But I am more optimistic since the EA sale because somebody new could buy the Dead Space IP. So the making calls thing, the optimism, again, I mean, that's really what this is, right, is optimism. It starts to actually get a little bit into like that scary category of what we talked about a little while ago, like when this EA thing goes through, and again, I don't think it's supposed to go through until April or so. When that happens, it's going to be quite an interesting next few months after that, right, for news. Just, who do they decide to shut down? What IPs do they intend to sell? It's going to be, I think, and I mean, even this is a guy who lives in the industry. I feel like, he's got an okay pulse of it. I really think there's probably going to be some major changes. When I think about BioWare and Mass Effect, man, I would not be shocked. I've talked about maybe, do they close them? Maybe you try to sell them, right? Maybe there's a PlayStation or Tencent or somebody out there that wants to buy BioWare and then we'll let them finish Mass Effect. Maybe you can work out a deal to sell Dragon Age, to sell Mass Effect. And here's the thing. That is a lot of, there's some fear there, even within me, because while EA is not the greatest, there's a sense of predictability, And when something sells, there can be positives, right? Because ultimately, you have this fire sale of all of these different franchises, all these different studios. You might get things that you previously would not get. And this is a perfect example of it, right? Like Dead Space truly is dead in the water. You are not getting that from EA. Even if they didn't do the buyout, it's just not going to happen. And that's sad. And by the way, that's just not right. I think it's an immoral thing to do. No, I mean, in all honesty, it's a franchise that's stuck, right? They did give it a try, and I guess I can respect the try. I would also, though, like to know what was the expectation for that Dead Space remake, because I thought it was one of the better remakes that's ever been created. And we know Dead Space sold, right? But like Dead Space 1 remake, were they expecting like 7, 8, 9, 10 million sales? They got like 2 or 3, because that's not, by the way, all that terrible. I feel like there needs to be kind of this reset of expectation. You look at like Alan Wake 2, Dead Space, like I don't think you should be expecting these games to sell 5 plus, but then, the budget's too high, or, maybe it takes too long to make these games. So seems like he's got some good ideas. I want him to do it. I like I said, I like the guy. I've watched interviews because he's getting up there in age too. And I remember watching an interview where he talked about like, he's at peace within himself if he never gets to be a director again of a game, because he's close to the end, and that's kind of a separate story for like the Hideo Kojimas of the world, some of these icons, right? they're getting older. They're getting their late 50s, 60s, even 70s, and they're not going to be around forever, and they're definitely not going to be creating games, even though Kojima wants to. I don't think they're all going to be creating games till the day they die. So I would like to see him, get... And I think that would really be like the closing, even though he's got more than just a Dead Space 4 idea. That would be like a nice poetic end, to his run, right? Starts Dead Space, puts him on the map, makes one of the greatest, kind of survival shooters of all time, and then kind of returns. He doesn't participate in any of the middle ones, but then comes back and maybe ends it where it starts, something like that. So I want it to happen, and like I said, there's fear with it, but I think if we're just talking Dead Space, fear with the EA stuff, but if we're just talking Dead Space, it might actually be for the best, because that's one that, just like maybe Mass Effect, a couple of them, I think, are some franchises maybe better in that EA ecosystem, or some studios? I think maybe. I think the Jedi series has obviously been allowed to do some amazing things, and I don't know if you get that not in EA. For some reason, EA actually allowed that thing to exist, and it worked out really well, right? Joseph Fares, who does the A Way Out and It Takes Two, and obviously Split Fiction, he's got a great relationship with EA, and they're pretty hands-off, but they obviously allow him to do what he's doing. So some things I think you don't want to mess up. You don't want to mess up a good thing, but some things are dead. Like Dragon Age is dead now. So it's maybe that's for the best that Dragon Age just gets sold. Mass Effect might be dead very soon, so maybe it's best that gets... Dead Space for sure is dead. Maybe it's... there are some things that you would like to be freed, from EA. Now, that doesn't necessarily guarantee it's better somewhere else, but I will say, at least it gives it a shot somewhere else. Whereas in the current ecosystem, you're not getting another Dead Space game ever. So even if a new one sucks, at least you get a try. You get a stab at it. At least you get to try. So maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.